joining us and you're looking at our Mishkan prayer book, Shir
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's so great to see all of you. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Re'eh, which means seeing. So we're going to be talking a little bit tonight about what it means to see things for how they really are. And I was thinking about how whenever I go home and I see my dad, we always get into an argument about politics because that's how we express love for each other in our family. And inevitably, and my siblings and I will always make fun of him for this, at some point in every single argument, he'll say, "You need to get real. You need to get real." I'm sure if anybody has ever said this to you, you can understand, how it's it can just put a stamp on an argument. But I think that actually is what we're trying to do on Shabbat. We're trying to get real, and not exactly in the way that my dad means it. We're trying to focus on what is really important. We're trying to spend time with people we really care about. And we're trying to see the real beauty and the real blessing that fills all of our lives. So I am so happy to be here with all of you this Shabbat, getting real together. And we are going to light the candles and experience all the real light that we bring into each other's lives. We are on page 120 for our candle blessing. We are turning to our Kiddush on page 123 and inviting up Diane and Richard Weinberg to lead us in prayer.
Okie dokie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, b'shabbat kodsho v'ahava uvratzon. Inchilanu, zicharon lema'aseh bereshit.
Join the meeting.
Ki hu yom tehila lemikrae kodesh, zecher letziat Mitzrayim. Ki vanu v'charta, ve'atanu kidashta, Mikol Hamim, B'Shabbat Kodechecha, Be'ahava uvratzon. Inchaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Amen.
Richard, Yasher Koach, that was wonderful to have Kiddush with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. First time, but
Speaking of Yasher Koach, we want to say, first of all, Cantor Ben David, it's so wonderful to be leading services with you. And it's so incredible to have the beautiful music of your brother Adam accompanying us tonight. So thank you so much for joining us on piano. It really helps facilitate the beauty of Shabbat, which is what Lecha Dodi, our next prayer, is about, celebrating the beauty of Shabbat.
We are on page 138. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala. We rise and face the entrance of our home. Shalom atet bala, gam simcha tzvola, tochem yam sula, bo vichala, lecha dodi, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela, lecha dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela.
Turn to page 142 for Shalom Alechem. We welcome in the angels of Shabbat.
Shalom Alechem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachei Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei
Please rise for the Baruch Hu. We are on page 146.
Lie, 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 lie,
Hundred and 52 for Shema.
Hero Israel, Adonai, our God is one. Hero Israel, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please be seated, if not already. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levacha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinamtam levanecha v'dibarta bam V'shivtecha v'beitecha u'v'lechtecha v'aderech u'shokbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu l'totafot b'neinecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha u'visharecha l'man tizkeru asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'Elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim V'hiyot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Emet. Our natural world is filled with illusions. We see a stick. In fact, it's a bug. A leaf. That's a bug too. There are fish that are made with both of their eyes on one side of their head so that they can sneak on the bottom of the sea floor and their predators won't find them. In this week's Torah portion, God places blessing and curse before the Israelites, and it seems so cut and dry. But our lives and much of it is so much more complicated. There are hidden features like that leaf bug that don't make it so very clear. Even our most joyful prayer lifts up a moment of terror. What about the myriad of people in Pharaoh's army who perished in the sea? It is not enough just to see the leaf or the stick. We must always look closer, looking deeper to see the holy life that exists within. On the next page, our ancestors, those who came before and had the most scary time of their day, was the night when they could not see. And we ask for peace in the evening in Hashkivenu on page 160. We turn to page 164, and we continue on the even pages with the Amidah as we rise in spirit.
Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomer Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, U'mevid Gula Livnei Bneihem, L'man Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'Ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai v'chayei hakol atah Rav Hoshia Morid Hatal Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed Mechayei hakol B'Rachamim Rabim Tomech Noflim V'Rofech Olim Umatir Asurim ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר ניחן מוחמד גבורות ומידו מלך ממיት ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע ונאמנת על החיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום להללוך הסלע ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We take a moment of private prayer, private meditation, and a moment just to look deep within as we maybe take a moment to close our eyes and see what we see who we are, see what we love, and see ourselves.
Shalom, shalom, Nimrod, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, Ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'yimnu amen. Uyaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, amen. Shalom, shalom, Nimrod, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael,
A poem written for Misha Berach. Dear God, we ask that you be there for us as you were for our ancestors, a pillar in our midst. Help us to turn to you, O God, for guidance during these troubled times. Give us strength for the week ahead. Help us to reach out in love and compassion to one another to support those who are ill, unable to leave their homes, or who struggle financially. Be with our doctors and caregivers, our nurses and scientists as they are working to develop a cure and care for those who are ill. Be with all those who are ill and their families, offering them your compassion. And we pray your healing. If there are those here in our Zoom community who would like to unmute and share a name or writing a name in the chat, I invite you to do so.
Buddy Tepper, Linda Kraft.
Vienna,
Huh?
Salzburg.
Bill Moritz.
Kathy Dorothy,
Ruben Kosarowski,
Ron
Helen
Rubin,
Kaufman
Eric
Ross.
Friedberg.
Carlos Tavares,
Helen Kaufman Roth, Ronald Wolf.
As we add to that list, David Mayer, Susan Levine, Alan Worth, Elaine Baddock, Rochelle Baddock, Jonathan Spitz, Ann Nicholas, Susan Kessler, Alicius Gelidin, Melissa Josephs, June Reentz, Millie, Sandy Ottenstein, Eric Boyd, Jan Knox, Dora Torres, Marge Hillard, Carol Curry, Hannah Hirschfeld, Galit Gottlieb, Elise Weigman, Jim Clemens, Avner Drucker, Debbie Frank, Drew Smith, Gary Reavers, Jed Snyder, Lauren Berland, Harriet Melrose, David Mork, as well as Amy Lee, Jerry Stewart, Flo Bernberg, Paula Serralo, Lester Rolski, Nico Stoller, Stan Gross, Kathleen Masterson, and Richard Stoller.
May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. So you've heard this one before. The world's top scientists send out a press release stating that that climate change and the calamity that it ensues because of it, that they've been warning about this for years, and now it's finally coming to pass. So they announce it will be catastrophic, wiping out the majority of the world's population, and it will happen in only 4 days. To comfort the people of the world, the Pope, the Dalai Lama, and the Chief Rabbi of Israel appear on television. The Pope says, "My children, you have 4 days to accept our Lord and Savior into your heart and find comfort by his side in heaven." The Dalai Lama says, "My friends, I ask all of you to embrace Buddhist teachings so that you may find inner peace in the midst of disaster. We have 4 days to find nirvana." And the chief rabbi says, "My people, we have 4 days to learn how to live underwater." So you've heard it before, and it's not only a joke that Israelis like to tell about themselves, but it's a joke that we love to tell about Israelis. The punchline sums up a sensibility about Israelis that many of us love.
We have 4 days to learn how to live underwater. And we almost believe it. We're fond of extolling the many seemingly miraculous accomplishments of Israel. From USB flash drive to Waze, to figuring out how to engineer a satellite to go in the reverse directional orbit of any other satellite of its time to avoid flying over nations hostile to Israel, or designing ReWalk, a bionic walking assistance system that enables paraplegics to stand upright and walk and climb stairs. Or yesterday's news might have seemed quite miraculous. We take pride in Israel's accomplishments. So when we hear about things that make us angry or ashamed of the modern state of Israel, even with yesterday's news of ending formal annexation in exchange for normalization of relations with the United Arab Emirates, there are still city-like settlements in the West Bank that have proliferated for years with a long-time blessing of the government. And this has left many liberal Jews with a profound sense of disconnection from our promised land. And lately, we've been hearing from some prominent American Jews, from Peter Beinart to Seth Rogen, who have voiced their disappointment with the status quo in Israel and Palestine. Peter Beinart voiced not only his critique, but his proposed solution, first in an essay in Jewish Currents and then in an op-ed in the New York Times last month. He claims, it's time to abandon the traditional two-state solution. It's time to imagine a Jewish home that is not a Jewish state. He continues, the goal of equality is now more realistic than the goal of separation. The reason is that changing the status quo requires a vision powerful enough to create a mass movement. A fragmented Palestinian state under Israeli control does not offer that vision. Equality can. Now, while some progressive American Zionists might be compelled by this vision, here's the problem. It completely sidesteps Jewish Israelis. By and large, Jewish Israelis are not ready to give up the Jewish modern state of Israel in order to have one binational secular state. Instead, the vast majority of them would like two states, one that is majority Jewish, Israel, and the other, Palestine. And Beinart betrays this flaw in his article when he writes, increasingly, one equal state is not only the preference of young Palestinians, it is the preference of young Americans too. Young Palestinians, young Americans, what about young Jewish Israelis? Such a strange omission that it lets us know that this perspective is unrooted in practical reality. And omitting the reality of what has actually happened and what is happening now on the ground in Israel and Palestine is partially what has led to this disconnect and disappointment of progressive, meaning non-Orthodox American Jews in the modern state of Israel. In a conversation with Mark Maron on his podcast, WTF, Seth Rogen, who grew up in Canada in a conservative shul, complained, as a Jewish person, I was fed a huge amount of lies about Israel. They never tell you that, oh, by the way, people were living there at the time of the state's founding. Today, in most Reform schools and synagogues, we do give a more realistic view of Israel, from its founding all the way until today, from the vantage point of all who are living in those environs. We hope to forge a strong and deep connection to the state of Israel that is based on a realistic understanding of our complex and beloved state. I agree with Yehuda Kurtzer, president of the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America, who often criticizes the organized Jewish community for maintaining narrower boundaries for legitimate dissent about Israel and its policies than exist within the actual Israeli Knesset. Whether American Jews are to the left or to the right when it comes to Israel, the problem is that we often misunderstand what is happening there because we don't see Israeli Jews on their own terms. Tal Becker explained this poignantly one evening a year ago in the Beit Midrash of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. He said, I have the kind of Jewish mother who says, put on a jacket, I'm cold. What does it mean to say, put on a jacket, I'm cold? I'm cold, and therefore I assume that you are cold. I have a solution to my problem, and so I see that the problem I attributed to you also has a solution I have attributed to it. I sometimes feel like the conversation between Israeli Jews and American Jewry is each of us telling the other, put on a jacket, I'm cold. And so the argument of put on a jacket, I'm cold, happens because we, Israeli and American Jews, live in different circumstances. Yet too often we think what is helpful to one of us will be helpful to the other, without really seeing each other's context of living. This is especially problematic when our solutions for the other's problem are not just in competition with one another, but in collision with one another. Let's look at what might be the most glaring difference that we're dealing with, or unfortunately that we too often ignore when we're trying to answer what the Jewish future needs to thrive either in America or in Israel. The strongest voices in American Jewry essentially say that the American Jewish future will be secured by fighting for open, democratic, pluralistic societies that are welcoming of immigration, that look for like-minded countries that are open to those ideas, that are fighting for peace and coexistence. And this is the kind of Jewish future we want, because that is where Jews survive. However, if you listen to the loudest voices in Israeli society today, they say that what is needed to secure the Jewish people is a resilient nationalism, a capacity to project power to deter Israel's enemies, a skepticism about pluralism and immigration, because it somehow affects that sense of cohesion. In other words, for a Jewish majority in a hostile Middle East, the conceptions and the discussions of what is needed in the Jewish future are necessarily going to sound very different to what for a Jewish minority in a fragmented democratic North America may feel. Hence, when the Peter Beinarts of our American Jewish world, whom I deeply respect even as I disagree, try to offer solutions that sound good to Americans, yet have little grounding in Israeli society, it falls into the category of, put on a jacket, I'm cold. Solutions to the seemingly intractable problem of the status quo in Israel and Palestine must be visionary, but to be effective, they also must be something that can be seen through to reality. And our Torah portion this week, Re'eh, has unique insight into seeing. In fact, the parasha this week begins, see. Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Now the grammar is strange. Though Moses is speaking to all of the Jewish people, he does not use the plural re'u. Instead, he uses the singular re'eh. Commentator Ibn Ezra remarks, this is to teach us that Moses talked to each person as individuals. He saw each person on their own terms and then was able to help them see what would be needed from them to perpetuate blessings for a Jewish future, one that would eventually have to reckon with how to live with sovereignty in a land destined for two nations. We cannot offer solutions to Jewish Israelis for how to change their society for the better unless we see them on their own terms and offer guidance from that place. Like Kurtzer, I believe deeply that our redemption as a Jewish people and the integrity of our national story cannot be complete with the oppression of the Palestinian people and with the prevention of their redemption. But the only way forward to that is through our Zionism. On the other side of this pandemic, we will again visit Israel as a congregation, where we will hear from Israelis and Palestinians on their own terms. Their voices will help us to truly see them and envision Israel and Palestine as lands of promise, even as we engage in ways to make that vision a reality. Until then, there are other ways for you to see them from a distance. You can subscribe to receive a weekly dispatch from Israel by leaders in the Reform movement through reformjudaism.org. You can download just about any podcast from TLV1, a podcast network based in Tel Aviv with programming in English. My personal favorite is the Promise Podcast, an inside view of Israeli politics, culture, and society. And you can find poems by contemporary Israeli and Palestinian poets at the Poetry Foundation online. Beholding the promise of our beloved land to bring dignity and redemption to all those living there may seem at times harder than learning to live underwater. Yet on this Shabbat, just 1 week before the month of Elul and its sounds of the shofar awaken us, let us envision a path to peace by truly seeing Israel's inhabitants. But the prayerful words of the great Israeli poet and singer, Naomi Shemer, speak to us tonight. What is the sound that I hear? The cry of the shofar and the sound of drums, all that we ask for. Lu Yehi, may it be. If only there can be heard within all this one prayer from my lips also, all that we seek. Lu Yehi, may it be. May it be a vision of peace based in reality, bold enough to move all of us into action in this year ahead. Lu Yehi. Well, I saw that in the chat, some people are wondering, is Adam Ben David going to join us during this High Holy Day season? And the answer is yes. We can hardly wait. We are so looking forward to a beautiful High Holy Day season spent with the Ben Davids. And so,
Rabbi, out there in our beautiful Zoom universe is our amazing Hannah Bureau and Ethan Parcell, and they'll be with us on violin and percussion and clarinet and everything in between. And Minkyu Shin will be on piano, so we're all going to be together.
I mean, we can hardly wait. So thank you so much this evening for being able to broadcast out to us tonight from Connecticut. We have loved every tune, every way in which you have embellished our beautiful worship. So thank you.
Thank you. I miss all of you.
We turn now to the bottom of page 586 as we envision a future we want to behold, where all will live in peace together. Aleinu. Please rise if you're able.
Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת כולנו יוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא ושמו אחד.
There's a great woman, Hannah Senesh, whom you all know a lot about, who was able to see a Jewish future that she knew that we needed to behold. She took great risks and lost her life in fighting for our people. And she showed us a way to think about our world, to see it for what it was, a world full of blessings, not only with the people who surround us physically, but the peoples whose memory continues to bless us. That if we look up at the stars and we think about the way in which the light still continues to reach us after the star has died, well, that's how those whom we love continue to bless us. Share with you these words. Yesh kochavim she'oram magia arza, rak ha'asher hem atzmam avdu ve'inam. There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, but their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways we remember. These are the ways we remember our loved ones. Beverly B. Delinsky, Howard Cohn, Marsha Landman, Julietta Sanchez, Elaine Kupfer, Robin Perlman Klima, Betsy Benyes Paradise, Blanche Kargerman, Connie Jo Punzi, Eleanor Singer, and Sylvia Nyberg, all of whose families are still observing Shloshim in their recent passing. We also remember those whose yahrzeit we mark on this Shabbat. Philip Bernstein Jr., Frances Lynette Bolin, Robin Cohn, Gary Cohn, Johanna Kremer, Brett Dicker, Sidney Dorfman, Frank Eaton, Annette Fettman, Ruth Frater Führer, David Goodman, Florence Kaplan, Lorraine Kessler, Milton Cohn, Nathan Kruger, M. Victor Leventrit, Anna Levy, Belle Sissy Lyman, Connie Olin, Beatrice Persky, Gail Rosenstein, Marion E.R. Schneider, Frida Singer, Doris Smith, Lynn Snyder, Sylvia Solomon, Claire Tarnoff, Robert Ullman, and Marjorie G. Weinberg. I invite you to unmute yourself and share other names of whom you are remembering, or to share them in the chat, either here on Zoom or on Facebook.
John Griffith.
Michael Blitz.
Cooper in there. Howard Vian, Sandra Goincher.
Sherry Camico Goodman.
Judd Weinberg.
I can't do it.
As well as David Sadkin, Norman Malanka, Michael Silverstein, Clementine Stoker. And those are her names for Kaddish.
We turn to page 598 for Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish.
Tadal v'yitkadash shemei rabba.
Amen.
Nalma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayachon uvyomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. V'galav bizman kari v'imru.
Amen.
Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'ishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha.
Grateful.
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tush b'chata v'nechamata. Da'amiran v'yalma v'yimeru.
Amen.
Yesh lama rabba min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru.
Amen.
Useh shalom imromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru. Amen.
Ose shalom nimromad huyase shalom aleinu be'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen.
I know that the Dicker family is going to lead us in the motzi. So our blessing over the challah.
It's just me. It's bedtime for the rest of the family.
Well, it's okay because Hannah was with us earlier and she got to welcome in Shabbat with Bucky Badger. So,
Thank you for that. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen.
And our closing song this evening, Lu Yehi, page 656. Let's sing it like it matters.
יש מפרש לבן באופן מול ענן שחור כבד הוא שמבקש לו יהי ואם בחלומות הערב אור נרות כוכב רואה הוא שמבקש לו יהי לו יהי
May this continue to be a Shabbat of seeing what's around us, appreciating it for what it is, seeing a vision of the world we want to behold, and see what actions are needed from us. And may then we enjoy a Shabbat of vision, a Shabbat of holiness, a Shabbat of peace. Shabbat Shalom.